Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Courtney Morris. She is an assistant professor of African American and Women's Studies at Penn State University. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, Sonali.
Two studies published by the American Geophysical Union today have identified the most stressed groundwater systems in the world. Researchers concluded that one-third of the biggest groundwater reserves are in serious trouble. The Arabian aquifer system was the worst off, a source of water for 60 million people. Closely following is the Indus Basin aquifer underneath northwestern India and Pakistan, followed by the Murzuk-Jajo Basin in northern Africa. The water system under drought-stricken California also made the list but is not as stressed. The research is based on data from two NASA satellites that measure dips and bumps in the Earth's gravity, which is affected by the weight of water. The scientists worry that climate change and population growth will only exacerbate the problems. They ask the important question, quote, what happens when a highly stressed aquifer is located in a region with socioeconomic or political tensions that can't supplement declining water supplies fast enough? Well, Courtney, how important is such research for long-term planning? And do you think people will heed the warnings of these scientists?
Well, I think it's difficult to overstate the importance of this research, especially since so little work has been done on the question of groundwater reserves and the impacts of climate change on this resource. And I think that the answer to this question that these scientists are posing, what happens when the water runs out, is conflict. In March of 2012, the Director of National Intelligence here in the United States issued a report basically saying that water wars are going to become more and more common in the future as water runs out. And they predicted that global demand for water was going to outpace current resources, existing resources, by about 40%. So we know that that water wars are going to be a part of our political future, and there seems to be very little planning on the part of national governments to really make meaningful plans for this. So this research is incredibly important. But I think what the report also reveals, and which we should think about as well, is that it shows us that many of the people who will be the first to experience the impact of the water crisis will be people living in places that are already, fraught with conflict, very vulnerable populations who are not going to have the resources to protect themselves in the face of that crisis. So it's a very frightening prospect.
And recovering quickly from their defeat of Trade Promotion Authority, Republicans in the White House are attempting to schedule another vote to give the president fast-track authority on the highly controversial and pro-corporate Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, because Democrats last week strategically voted down a companion bill called TAA that would have set up a job training fund for U.S. workers. Pro-TPP lawyers may go ahead with the Trade Promotion Authority anyway. House Speaker John Boehner met yesterday with sympathetic Democrats, and sources told Politico that a new vote on TPA without assistance for workers may be rushed through as early as this week. Meanwhile, the House passed a procedural vote yesterday to enable the TAA bill to be revived anytime until July 30th. So in a nutshell, they hope to pass fast-track authority now and deal with the accompanying job assistance bill later. Courtney, I know this all sounds very confusing, but it seems as though the GOP and even the White House have no problem throwing U.S. workers under the bus in order to get authority for TPP. What do you think?
Well, certainly. I think the lengths to which Republican leaders in the Obama administration are prepared to go to secure fast-track authority really should tell the public that they don't want people to know what's happening in these closed-door meetings because they know that the public would not approve of what's being decided. And I think even the call for the trade adjustment assistance, which, is being billed as a sort of protection for workers, is dubious, right? On one hand, it's essentially a way of providing support for workers who will lose their jobs as a result of the trade agreement. And so so the people who are negotiating this agreement know that workers are going to suffer from what's being decided here. And rather than making the process more transparent, opening it up, making negotiating states more accountable, and actually putting in real and meaningful language in the agreement that would actually protect the interests of workers, they're instead going to give workers a welfare program. And I think that this is so indicative of the kind of neoliberal ethos that is governing all of these negotiations. And we need to continue to political leaders in the House and in the Senate need to continue to push back against fast-track authority.
And finally, a poll in the electoral battleground state of New Hampshire spells good news for presidential candidate Bernie Sanders and bad news for his rival Hillary Clinton. The Suffolk University poll this week found that Sanders has surged ahead in popularity, trailing only 10 points behind Clinton. Among those who know who both candidates are, there is only a 3-point difference, suggesting that Clinton's name recognition is benefiting her. Other polls have found similar results. In other presidential race news, Donald Trump has announced his intention to run in a campaign launch that the Washington Post headlined, "Spectacular, Unending, Utterly Baffling, and Often Wrong." The author of that report, tasked with fact-checking Trump's launch speech, wrote, quote, "Treating Trump's arguments as serious is like treating Siri's arguments as serious. He's programmed to talk about how he's the best and the President Obama is the worst and he can fix everything." Well, Courtney, first, what do you make of Sanders' seeming success? And second, I'm sort of sorry that I even brought up Donald Trump, as we're supposed to be covering serious news here, but I just couldn't resist.
Well, I think Bernie Sanders is a very welcome progressive presence in what is increased, turning into a political circus. But, I think we should view the polls with cautious optimism. We still need to see how he's going to do in states a little bit further away from the Northeast in his home state of Vermont. And he's really going to have a difficult road ahead of him in terms of keeping up with Hillary Clinton and, her war chest. So, cautious optimism, I think, is the word here. But, even if Bernie Sanders, regardless of the outcome, his chances for the nomination look promising. But even if he doesn't get the nomination, I think that he's already playing a very critical role, as we've already seen, in pushing Hillary Clinton to take more explicitly progressive stances on a number of issues, from climate change to student loans to Wall Street reforms. And so that's very important. As for Donald Trump, it's a farce.
Enough said. Courtney, thanks as always for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye, Sonali.
Courtney Morris is an assistant professor of African American and Women's Studies at Penn State University. We'll be right back.